Okay, welcome back to Ultimate Potential, a mental health podcast. I'm Tony Mosier,
And I am Craig Lamont.
and we are your illustrious hosts. We're here. I think this is our 6th or 7th episode. So when we get to episode 10, we're planning on having a big party because at that point we'll be old timers, right? We'll be professionals at this.
Let's hope so.
So we are here. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Alice. And Alice is a mom who has a child who is in residential treatment right now, who's kind of right in the middle of everything. In one of our earlier episodes, we spoke with another parent whose child had been home from treatment for, I think, 1 or 2 years. And so that was really interesting to be able to kind of talk through the process, what it was like, what coming home was like. But this time, I mean, Alice is right in the middle of it. She's right in the what we call the messy middle. And so there are some things I'm sure that are really exciting and hopeful, and then there are other times where it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But we thought it would be really helpful and interesting to have Alice on and to have her tell us a little bit about her journey. So, Alice, I'm wondering if you would mind just sharing a little bit about yourself. I know that you come to us having some credentials of your own. You're in the helping
Mm-hmm.
profession, and so can
Yep.
you tell us a little bit about what you do professionally, and
Sure.
then maybe just kind of share what you will, what you feel comfortable about your story, and we'll just jump in with questions and comments as we go.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Sure. Yeah. So I am a licensed dietitian and a licensed mental health counselor in Florida, and I specialize in working with eating disorders. So I practice from a paradigm called intuitive eating, and absolutely love what I do. I've been doing it for, I've been a dietitian now for over 20 years and a therapist for about 5 years. And so I really love what I do, and it's interesting because as you know, I for the last 20 years I've known what I've been on the other side. I've been a treatment professional working with families, working with them and walking with them as they send their children to treatment, higher level of care for eating disorders, and witnessing their struggles and their pain, and walking with the individuals as they go into treatment for recovery. And you would think, as a professional who does this day in and day out, that I might know a little something. But when it's your own child, it's a whole different ballgame, and a whole different ballgame. I'm much more emotionally involved. I see certain things and don't see other things. And so, as we entered our story, it was just an interesting dynamic to be on the other side and to be the parent that's talking to another professional, hearing how my son is struggling and what my son needs, and the ups and downs of that.
Craig and I
So,
can't relate
yeah.
to that at all, can we,
Yeah.
Craig?
So, Alice,
Yeah.
you. One of the things after all these years of being in this setting and working with so many awesome, skilled, educated, wonderful, loving, supportive parents, right? And then you
Yeah.
walk around in your neighborhood with your friends or your colleagues or your, people who you just kind of rub shoulders with outside of the treatment center world. And there's
Right.
such an assumption, like people say, oh, isn't it just because the parents are kind of screwed up, or isn't it this? I mean, they make assumptions. And then
Well,
the parents who do
exactly.
find us, there's a lot of shame, and like at least 60-70% of our families, they feel judged by the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the society. But
Yes.
man, it's,
Yes.
for me, particularly, right, when you get the older teenagers and even young adult children, as my own children have kind of come into their own really critical need for therapy and support,
Mm-hmm.
and man, I've learned so much as a parent of children who need professional and mental health support way more
Mm-hmm.
than all of my degrees and all of my years of being a therapist or
Right.
the CEO or anything else, right? And the learning is rich, and so for me, it's been a journey of not falling into the same assumption that I get upset with that other people fall into, which is, well, if you just do everything right and have the right knowledge, then your kids will turn out just fine. And
Exactly.
and it's just
Exactly.
it's a fallacy, you're right, and it doesn't
Right.
matter. Yeah, it's just a
But
fallacy.
yet we fall into it. I mean, I
Yeah.
have young
We,
adult children, and they're right in those years where they're struggling, and sometimes I'll fall into that kind of thinking, and then I just remember it's like, well, you can be a brilliant heart surgeon, but that doesn't mean that you can do heart surgery on yourself, right? You still
yes.
have to
Yes.
go to someone else. There are times when you can't do it as a parent, and yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. And we live in a fallen world, right? So all of us have experienced a level of harm or pain or trauma or something in our lives. And we carry that into our parenting. And we could go to school and learn all the healthy communication strategies, or we could be doing our own therapy as well. And the change or the healing from that is still hard. And our kids sometimes get the fallout, even if we're trying really hard to do, quote, do everything. I'm saying, quote, if you see my hands, quote, right. Is and but like life is just so much more complex than that.
mm-hmm.
Yes.
Um, so yeah,
So tell us a little bit about your story, the path that you've walked and are
sure,
currently in the middle of.
sure, yeah. So, um, what brought us where we are now is in about 2020. So the height of COVID. It was the summer between eighth grade and freshman year for my son. He began experimenting with alcohol and substances. And over the next 1 to 2 years, it escalated to daily and consistent use. Addiction runs in our family. So genetically, we are predisposed to addiction. And his dad and I, who we're not married, but we co-parent together really well, we started to do all the things that parents typically do: grounding, taking away his phone. Then we began to, have him go to therapists, psychiatrists. We, took him to church, tried to get him in a youth group. Just all the things that parents typically try to do. Set strict boundaries, and so on. But as you know, with addiction, that it didn't it wasn't working. So in October of 2021, I was frantically searching online at about 2 a.m. in the morning, because that's what parents do when they're worried about their kids, is they stay up till 2 a.m. and they look online and read everything they can. And I found a support group. It's called the Stream Support Group, founded by Brenda Zane. And it said, I Googled teenage son struggling with substance use, and her group came up, and I signed up for the free 2 week free 2 week trial. And instantly it felt so good to me. It was a group of moms whom had been there, who were there, who I could weep with, I could talk with, I could learn from. And that began the process of me really learning about mothering a child with substance use abuse. And I learned this group. This is where I learned about education consultants. This is where I learned about wilderness therapy. I learned about therapeutic boarding schools. And so I just really began kind of taking it all in, sharing with his dad the stuff that I was learning. And from there, we set up with an education consultant, Elaine Morgan, here in Florida, and she helped us. We sent last 2022, May of 2022, we sent Jake. We got Jake to Wilderness Therapy in Maine, Summit Achievement Center, and that experience was a very, very positive experience. If he were with us right now, he would tell you that he learned how to tolerate discomfort. He learned he began to learn about the underpinnings of his substance abuse. He learned that he actually has some leadership qualities. and more about himself. He began to discover parts of himself that he didn't know were there. And then towards the end of that journey, we knew that he wasn't ready to come home. And he knew that he wasn't ready to come home. So we began kind of the search for what's the next step. And then Elaine brought us to you all at Telos, and that's where he's at right now. Um, and um, and he's been there for, I believe, 6 months. And that was a bumpy journey. It was a bumpy journey for all. That decision was harder because it was longer term. Meant he was going to be away longer, and it was hard for us, and it was hard for him too. And it was, it's more money. It's a lot to think about. So that decision, his dad and I had a lot of sleepless nights. We had tears. It was a big decision, but we're grateful that he's there. It's been a very positive experience, but it hasn't, I say that, and when I say good, I mean like a redemptive good, not like a feel good good.
Right.
Um,
It's a lot of hard work, right? Yeah.
yes, a lot of hard work, not peaches and roses. Ups and downs, emotional roller coaster. We've had family sessions that have been very difficult, and family sessions where there's been breakthroughs. But I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot more about my son. We think as parents, we know our kids, and we don't always know all about our kids. I've learned more about his feelings. I've learned more about how my own anxiety impacted him. He's been able to share with me that, and I've had to learn and grow how to not be defensive when he's telling me how things about me have hurt him or how I have hurt him. And then also not just that, but to then do my own work to work on continuing to heal my own anxiety so that I don't continue that pattern with him. So it's been a lot of hard work, for me as well, to try to grow and learn to come alongside him in ways that that are more effective, that are more healing. And I feel like our relationship, even though he's thousands of miles away, I feel like our relationship is closer because we can talk about the hard things. We laugh a lot more together. Um, and I still, because we're in the middle of our journey, I still hold that angst of, what are the next steps going to look like? I know he's safe. He's there. He's with you all, and he's safe. And there's going to be a time where he discharges, right? And there's going to be a transitional time. So holding all of that, it's complex,
Yeah.
definitely complex.
That's a
Hmm.
scary,
Yeah.
emotionally, like that anxiety is hard to deal with, right? Because it's
Yes.
constantly there behind the
Hmm.
scenes. Yeah.
We have a gentleman here at Telos named Larry Smith, and he is our Telos aftercare support specialist.
Right.
He's a
Right.
therapist, and he will often tell me that when a child goes home, the first thing, it lasts anywhere from 1 day to 2 weeks, is the honeymoon period, and
Right.
things are great. It's kind of the golden child, and everything seems perfect. But then they move from that honeymoon phase into what he calls the testing phase. And the testing phase
Yes.
is where something happens. It might be a relapse. It might be the first fight. It's something happens that
Yeah.
invites the parents and the child to say, "Oh, look, this didn't work. We're right back to day one," you know?
Right.
And that
Right.
invites in despair and fear. And then,
Hmm.
of course, that triggers old ways of being and old ways of reacting that don't work. And that's a
Right.
really vulnerable time, that testing phase. That testing phase we
Yep.
found lasts anywhere, it can last up to a couple of months, right? As people are trying to
Yes.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And then with support and patience, you can get into what's called the maintenance phase. And the maintenance phase
Mm.
is where everything starts to gel, and they're able to figure out how to apply the new skills with kind of boots on the ground in their natural habitat. and things just kind of get
Mhm.
better slowly over time.
Mhm.
And but that
Yeah.
testing phase is a vulnerable time where it feels like a lot of progress can unravel. Um, and
Mhm.
so that what Larry's job is to help families through that testing phase.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I love I both I both hold hope to move into the time where things continue to get better, and I also um hold the angst of the test, knowing on my logical part of my brain knows, okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? And then the emotional part of my brain just wants to run for the hills.
Yeah.
But I also I hold all of that together. And we have a bit of a scenario where Jake is turning 18. He'll be graduating from high school there at Telos in May, and he's turning 18. So life is actually going to look really different for
yeah,
all of
Yeah.
us, because he might not be living at home. He probably won't be living at home with us, actually, and then going off to college and things like that. Um, so we're also learning kind of how to transition from being the day-to-day parents to more of the consultants,
Right.
right.
um,
Yeah.
making that transition as well.
Wish I could tell
So
you. Wish I
yeah.
could predict that it's easier, but so
I know.
Alice,
Yeah.
you know the after 3 decades of working with families and having my own children, right? Like watching this process happen over and over and over again, with tens and then with hundreds and now with thousands of parents. I can give all sorts of wise things, wise advice, but I want to hear from you,
Mhm.
Alice, right in the middle, like you're right in the middle of the residential
Yeah.
treatment portion of an almost 18-year-old son. What advice do you have for the mom or the dad or the whoever out there
Mhm.
who has a child just like yours, right? What advice do you have for them?
So the number one thing I would actually say two things. Number one is get support. Get support. The Stream Moms group for me, which is a mom support group for those struggling with substance abuse, was invaluable for me. And I know they have numerous support groups for other. So if you have a kid that's not struggling with substance abuse but something else, there's other groups out there. I know there's a group called Other Parents Like Me, which is a group for parents with kids who are struggling. So get support, because you are not alone. And in this struggle, we often can feel like we're alone, and we can, and shame, Brene Brown talks about how shame is isolation is the petri dish for shame, right?
Yes.
So being able to talk to people about actually what is going on and receiving compassion and empathy and not judgment is crucial for our well-being and our ability to parent our kids. Um, and then secondly, this kind of goes along with it. It's a part of it is self-care. Self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. A lot of people think, oh, I just don't have time for self-care. Like, I just don't have time for that. It's a necessity. I say, like, if someone has heart disease, often they have to take medication, maybe cholesterol lowering medication or aspirin. Or if someone has diabetes, they've got to take insulin to manage their diabetes. If you've got a kid struggling, you've got to do self-care to be able to parent your child, and be able to function. And with that, with those two things, um, it's doable. I wish I could say this magical thing like, oh, it's going to get better. It's going to be great, and it's going to get better. It's up and down. It's a roller coaster. It's a marathon, not a sprint. However, if you have support and you have self-care, you can still have bright moments. You can still find miracles in the mud. And so that those two things to me have just been the most crucial parts of this journey.
That's fabulous
Miracles in the
advice.
Mud.
Yeah.
That's the name of your new book.
I love that. I love that.
There you go.
You can find her.
So how would a parent find the Stream support group? They just Google it.
Sure. So, Yeah, I mean, that's how I found it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And at that point, I had really no sense about me in that moment. But yes, if you Google Stream and Brenda Zane, it will pop up.
Zane with a Z
Um,
or Zane with an
yeah,
X? Okay. Okay.
You know what?
Zane with a Z.
We'll
Yeah.
have maybe Rachel can find that for us and put it in the show notes down
Yeah, that
below.
would
Can
be
Show
put a
great.
link
notes.
down
Yeah.
there. So
Also,
maybe let's
Yeah.
link up other parents like me
yep.
and
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 Yeah.
that one.
stream.
And then also, will you give a shameless plug for your own private practice? Can you give us either a website or
Sure.
anything
Sure.
that you
Yeah.
want?
It's Alice. Yeah. It's AliceLBaker.com.
Okay.
And I am a dietitian and therapist. I'm licensed in the state of Florida. Um, I can also practice as a dietitian in a couple other states. They could contact me, states that don't require state licenses. And I specialize in working with eating disorders, and I practice from an intuitive eating and health at every size paradigm. But on my website, alicelbaker.com, it talks about my philosophy, background, things like that. And I'm
Okay.
hoping to get licensed in some other states as well soon.
Fantastic. And then one last thing that
Yeah.
we want to link is you mentioned your educational consultant, and I assume that because you
Yes.
mentioned her, you highly recommend her. Do you have her
Yes.
contact information, or can you just repeat her
I
name and we'll find it?
Yeah, sure. It's Elaine Morgan, and her practice is Morgan Guidance.
Okay. Good.
Let me see.
And I think we can find that
Yeah.
link for you. We'll link it up.
Yeah, it's morganguidance.com. Yeah.
So
She's fabulous. She's fabulous.
Alice,
Hmm.
personal thank you. So sincere and genuine, and of course we know because your son's here with us, just how hard you're working and how delightful he is. But we
Yeah.
want to particularly thank you for opening up your personal life, opening up your heart, in and helping other people to find their ultimate potential.
And I want to
Well,
thank you specifically for being a professional in the mental health space and being vulnerable and open, because I think that we expect a lot of ourselves, and sometimes other people out there can almost dehumanize us in
Yes.
a little bit. And but we're human
mhm,
beings, and we have the same struggles and challenges that everyone else has.
mhm. Yes, well, it's been a delight to talk with the both of you, and I'm so grateful to have been able to do this as well.
Well, good.
Okay, so parents out there, take a note from Alice and remember to get help, get support, follow some of these links. Make sure to dive deep into your own self care. You can be at the top of the list for people who need care. You don't need to be the last one on the list. We are going to go ahead and sign off until next time. We wish Alice and her son Jake the best of luck in their continued journey. And to all those parents and people out there, keep the faith and remember mental health matters.